Hello everyone and welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today we're going to be doing the final NFL draft grade video, and this one's going to be for the NFC West. I know it's been a little bit of time since I made the last one, just trying to get caught up on everything. Going forward, just a little heads up for you guys. I'll probably be putting out 2 or 3 videos a week for a couple weeks. Going to be working on some projections, going to be scouting some of the prospects for the 2022 draft, some of the bigger names for that. Going to try to put them in my spreadsheet. Really get their rankings out, see how they compare to each other. And then once I'm done with that, I'll share with you guys some of my favorite prospects in the 2022 draft class. But without further ado, we'll get into the 2021 draft class and the grades for the NFC West teams. We'll start off with the Arizona Cardinals. And they picked Zaven Collins, linebacker out of Tulsa, with their first pick, number 16 overall. Zaven Collins, I thought he was a back half of the first rounder guy. Not a big position of need for the Cardinals. Obviously, they took Isaiah Simmons last year. Still have Jordan Hicks. They still have a couple different other guys at linebacker as well. I thought maybe they were going to draft him and be kind of that Hassan Reddick replacement. But supposedly he's going to play Mike linebacker, and they told Jordan Hicks he can look for a trade deal essentially. So we'll see what happens with that, but very interested to see what happens with him. Obviously, most notably, he was charged a couple days ago, reckless driving. He was driving like 76 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. If you guys are out there, please do not do that. You're probably going to end up hurting yourself or someone else. Definitely not worth it. And especially if you're someone who is as famous as an NFL athlete, just make better decisions. And for that pick, I gave it a C overall. It's just, like I said, it's not a position that I thought they really needed. Then in the second round, they went with Rondale Moore, my 5th wide receiver in this year's draft class. I think it was a very good value where they got him for. I think it's a very good scheme for him as well. The short passes, get him the ball in space, let him have some opportunity to be successful. I think it's going to be a good scheme fit for him. We'll see what happens if Cliff Kingsbury does get fired after this year, because I think he's not a very good coach. But we'll go into that some other day. But definitely an A pick for Rondale Moore here. Great value. Then they didn't have a pick all the way till the end of the 4th round. They picked Marco Wilson, super athletic corner out of Florida, still a little bit raw. I did give this pick a B, definitely an area of need, definitely a pretty good value as well. So we'll see how he develops at the NFL level. And then in the 6th round, they took, I'm going to screw up his last name, but Victor Dimukichi out of Duke, defensive end. He's probably more of a guy that was a 7th round pick to me. I gave this pick a C overall. I think they did need some defensive line help, but not sure he's going to be able to play a 3-4 end. Might have to be that 3-4 outside linebacker, edge rusher. Probably a guy that's going to have to come in and develop for a while before he's ever usable, if that is even the case. Then at the end of the 6th round, they got Tay Gowan out of Central Florida. Very good pick here overall. I gave it an A pick. Area need, kind of like Marco Wilson pick. Tay Gowan probably could have gone as high as Marco Wilson went, but he was a COVID opt-out, played pretty good in the 2019 season, but for whatever reason, his draft stock just fell. Not quite sure what's up with that. Then in the 7th round, they picked James Wiggins, safety out of Cincinnati. I talked about the other safety out of Cincinnati, Derek Forrest, in one of the other videos. I think James Wiggins was definitely not as good of a safety there. Kind of athletic. He's been known to miss a couple tackles here and there, so we'll just see how he develops at the NFL level. Probably just a special team or depth piece at the NFL level, though. And then they went with Michael Menet out of Penn State, the center. Center wasn't a huge position in need now that they brought in Rodney Hudson, but a guy that can come in, develop, hopefully he turns into some kind of that dart throw at the 7th round pick. I gave that pick a C grade as well. I don't think Menet was a guy that was really going to get drafted, but at the end of the 7th round, I don't really have a problem with it either. So overall, I did give the Cardinals a C+ draft. I think they filled some positions in need. I think their team definitely did get better. There's some questionable picks here and there, but a solid draft overall. Could have been a little bit better, but definitely could have been worse as well. Speaking of could it be worse, we have the Los Angeles Rams draft, and this was just by far the worst draft of the 2021 NFL draft by any team. So they started out with Tutu Atwell, a 2nd round pick, wide receiver out of Louisville. Obviously, he's pretty fast, little tiny guy, 5'9", 155 pounds. Here you see at his pro day. At the medical combine in Indianapolis, he was 149 pounds. So you're looking at like another Tavon Austin, but even smaller. Very niche player. They already got Deshaun Jackson. They got Van Jefferson. They got Robert Woods. They got Cooper Kupp. They got all these wide receivers. I don't know how he's going to play. I think this was kind of just a wasted pick. I had a 5th round grade on him myself. Not a big Tutu Atwell fan. So I gave this pick a D overall. Obviously, ESPN was a little bit higher on him. They had him 44th overall, but I just really have never seen it there with him. So I don't think it's a very good pick. Then in the third round, they went Ernest Jones out of South Carolina. I thought he'd be like a 4th, 5th round pick. We'll see how he fits in their scheme. I don't know if he's really better than anybody they already have, so it might be a year or two before we see him in action. So I gave that pick a C overall. It was a position of need, though. Then Bobby Brown out of Texas A&M, defensive tackle. Arguably their best pick in the NFL draft. They really like to keep defensive line depth. They lost Michael Brocker, so hopefully he can kind of come in, be a rotational piece for them, and really contribute to their defense overall. Then also in the 4th round, they went with Robert Rochelle, Central Arkansas, cornerback. Obviously, they did lose Troy Hill in free agency. Robert Rochelle's a super athletic guy. Obviously, playing at Central Arkansas FCS level. Didn't really play this year. Looked pretty good at the Senior Bowl. So there's a little bit of upside with him. It's probably going to take him a while to get there, so I don't think he's going to have major impact right away, but I think he's an intriguing prospect, and I don't hate the pick, especially at a position that could be considered an area of need as well. So I did give that pick a B as well. Then we get down to Jacob Harris, wide receiver out of Central Florida. Supposedly they're going to convert him to tight end. Had a crazy pro day. But if you watched the Central Florida film like I did, you had to look for this guy. He wasn't even on the field that often. Pretty much the 4th wide receiver there at Central Florida, sometimes even the 5th wide receiver. Not a long history of contributing. Obviously, he didn't really play football till a later age in high school. Went to Western Kentucky, then ended up transferring to Central Florida. Supposedly, he's doing really well in camp. I'm just not a big believer in it. I think he's definitely a guy you probably could have got in the 6th, 7th round. And you took him here in the 4th round. It's just a massive, massive reach to me. And that's definitely an F grade. And that might be the only F grade I've given out this year. There's some other ones that have been pretty close, though, but that is one of them for sure. And then they took Ernest Brown, defensive end out of Northwestern. He's probably a guy that I would consider more like a 6th, 7th round pick. A little bit reach here. So I gave that as C overall as well. Like I said earlier with Bobby Brown, just building up that defensive line depth is something the Rams have really prioritized. And then in the 7th round, they went with Jake Funk out of Maryland. Very interesting guy, kind of been behind some of these other running backs at Maryland, whether it was Ty Johnson, Javon Leake, or Anthony McFarland Jr. Has quite an injury history, a little bit older prospect, had a very solid pro day, looked really good this year. There's a lot of questions with him. Will he be able to stay healthy? What impact does he have at the NFL level? Obviously, they drafted a running back 2 straight years with Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, so he's probably going to be the 3rd fiddle on the team if he beats out Xavier Jones or Raymond Calais. There's a little bit of upside there. I'll give him that. I gave it a C pick overall, not a big position in need. Then they took Ben Skoranek out of Notre Dame. He was actually one of my lower rated wide receivers in this year's class out of the 70 that I did grade. I didn't think he was going to get drafted. He's another guy that could potentially convert to tight end as well. Him and Jacob Harris maybe. So maybe they're just trying to get 2 guys like that and hopefully one of them pans out. But I just don't see it. I gave that pick a D grade overall. You already have all this wide receiver draft. You already have a bunch of depth at wide receiver, and you took 3 in this draft. Just does not sound like a good idea. And then, last but not least, they went with Chris Garrett out of Corcadia St. Paul. He's a small school guy. They have him listed as outside linebacker. I think he was also listed as defensive end. I could be wrong about that. I do not know a lot about him. I'm just going to give it a C pick overall. 7th round pick, not anything you can blame wrong there on a small school guy. Overall, I did give the Rams draft class a D+. That might be even being generous, but with that being said, that it is by far the worst draft class of any team this year. Then we'll get moved over to the Seattle Seahawks, and they only had 3 picks, so it's kind of hard to grade their draft overall, but Dwayne Eskridge they took in the back half of the 2nd round. One of the older wide receiver prospects, if not the oldest one in this year's draft class, already 24 years old, played some corner in college, played some wide receiver. Super fast guy, super quick, lesser competition. Didn't really dominate too much until this year. Very good in the kick return and punt return game. So maybe he gets his niche there. Hopefully he comes in, becomes that 3rd wide receiver. Maybe, takes over Tyler Lockett's role when they're ready to move on from him about 3 years from now. But it's a little bit of a risky pick too. I think he was more like a 3rd round pick, but taking him in the 2nd round, I don't hate it. And I think they had some other areas of need that they probably could have gone with as well. So I'm just going to give this one an EC grade overall. Then the 4th round, they went with Trey Brown, corner out of Oklahoma. I do like Trey Brown. Probably thought he was like 5th, 6th, maybe even a 7th round pick. There is some upside there with him, but he's not really a guy that fits the Seattle scheme, so maybe he's going to come in and try to play slot corner for them. We'll just have to see how they use him. I gave that pick a C overall. Position of need, but a little bit of a reach as well. Then probably their best pick of the whole entire draft, even though they only had 3 picks, with Stone Forsythe, offensive tackle out of Florida. Graded out very well on PFF's grading for pass protection last year. Obviously a position of need on that offensive line. We've seen Russell Wilson kind of complain about it. Developmental tackle, hopefully he comes in, becomes a tackle for the future, or even if you have to move him inside the guard, definitely an interesting prospect and profile there overall. With that all being said, they only had 3 picks. I did give them a C+ overall. They filled some needs, probably a couple reaches there as well, but Stone Forsythe might have actually ended up saving their draft. Then we'll get moved over to the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, they made that big trade to get up to number 3 overall for Trey Lance. I did give it a pick of B overall. You have to account the capital that they did trade up for him. I will not be surprised if he does not play until later in the season or at all this year, if kind of that Patrick Mahomes route. But, he's a project quarterback. He could end up being the best quarterback in this year's class. When I was doing my grading stuff, looking back, if this was like 10 years ago, he'd probably be a second-round pick. I really have compared him to Colin Kaepernick coming out of Nevada. Obviously, he's a little bit thicker, a little bit better as a runner in that regard, but there's a lot of similarities there overall, and I think he's an interesting prospect. Maybe he ends up being like a Cam Newton, a Josh Allen, somewhere in between there. Definitely a wide range for him overall. Then in the second round, they went with Aaron Banks out of Notre Dame. I believe he was actually the first major guard off the board besides Elijah Vera Tucker. He's an interesting prospect, had a pretty good Senior Bowl. I think he actually took some snaps at center there as well. I probably thought he was more of a third-round pick. A little bit of a reach, but a position need as well, so I gave that pick a B as well. Then obviously they traded up for Trey Sermon, and everybody's hyping him up now in the third round. So this is a pick that I don't really love. Trey Sermon was a guy that I'm not super high on. I don't think he has a lot that translates well to the NFL level. You guys might roast me for that if you want. That's fine. But I just don't see a lot there. Has a big injury history as well. The 49ers are really known for not investing draft capital in running backs either and making them work. Plus, they have a lot of running backs already there. Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson before he got hurt, Wayne Gallman. They drafted Elijah Mitchell later in this draft as well. JaMychal Hasty, that was kind of there last year. I'm not big on him by any means, though. But I just think kind of taking a pick on Trey Sermon in the third round was just a little bit of a reach. I gave it a C overall. I don't hate the pick, but I really don't like it either. Their other pick in the third round, they picked Ambry Thomas out of Michigan. This was a pick that I really didn't like. I gave it a D grade overall. Cornerback was a position of need. He looked terrible at the Senior Bowl. He probably should have been like a 6th round pick, so I don't get this one by any means, but hopefully it pans out for them. Then the 5th round, they went with Jalen Moore out of Western Michigan. If I remember correctly, he played some tackle there. They have him listed as guard here. Probably that kind of swing developmental offensive lineman. Hopefully he turns into something. I gave that pick a B overall. Then they went with DeAndre Lenoir out of Oregon. I've seen some people that are really high on him. I think he's a decent prospect, has a chance to develop and become a major contributor on a defense. I gave him that pick a B overall as well. And then at the end of the 5th round, they went with Talanoa Huafunga out of USC. Probably butchered his name. Safety. He actually did better at his pro day than a lot of people were projecting him to do. So I gave this pick a B overall. I think he's definitely somebody that could come in and be a factor in their defense at some point in time. Might not be this year, might not be next year, but maybe even the year after that, he turns into somebody. I think he's got some translatable skills that could play well as like a box safety. Definitely an interesting prospect, and I think he's somebody they can really develop. Then in the 6th round, they went with Elijah Mitchell. I was not too high on Elijah Mitchell pre-draft, looking at his film and everything like that. Obviously, he had that killer pro day, and that's what really hyped him up. But, he still only got 6th round draft capital. They already picked Trey Sermon, so this pick seemed kind of weird. I'll give it a C grade as well. But overall, for the 49ers, I had to give them a B-. I think it was an interesting draft. They addressed a lot of positions of need. There was a couple reaches in there as well, which really hold them back, but could have been a better draft, but still a pretty solid draft. Hopefully, some of these guys that they picked that are developmental type of players really pan out for them overall. But with that being said, this is all I got for the NFC West draft grades. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed. This is the last video of the NFL draft grade series. So if you guys haven't seen all the other ones, be sure to go back and watch as well. Definitely appreciate you guys that have been tuning into them. Some of them have been doing pretty well. Definitely be sure to leave some of your comments down below if you agree with a grade that I gave, disagree. If your favorite team's in this division, be sure to let me know your guys' thoughts on your favorite team's draft as well. And with that being said, if you guys are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. It really helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. And that's truly one for you, the viewers, helping you guys with your DFS, whether it's NFL or NBA. Obviously, the NBA is really turning down now. The Eastern Conference and Western Conference finals, a lot of fun there. I've been playing a little bit of single game DFS with that. Maybe I'll make a video in the coming days just kind of talking about that, but it's really kind of a niche right now, and it's harder to play single game NBA DFS than it is for like the NFL games. Then also helping you guys with your fantasy football teams. Going to be doing some more deeper dive into Dynasty series like I did with D Brown, and then really trying to get into some redraft stuff as we get around the corner. I'm going to be, like I said, I'm going to be working on projections and scouting some guys for the 2022 NFL draft class. So videos are going to be cut back a little bit, probably 2 or 3 a week, but just keep your eye out for them. If there's anything you guys would like to see, definitely be sure to let me know. And I really, truly do appreciate each and every one of you that has been tuning into these videos, watching them, liking them, giving them comments. Definitely appreciate it. And I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.